Okay, I'm so sorry that we got disconnected. Hopefully we will stay connected now. A little issue with our Zoom account. Okay, so we're talking today about a topic that I'm super passionate about, how to feel beautiful in a world that defines it for you. I'm passionate about it as a woman, as a mother of daughters. I think this is an issue that affects, it doesn't make a difference what affiliation you have, what background you have. It's just something that I've seen is very pervasive as an issue in our world. So, Gevura, I'd love to hear, what is your relationship with the subject? Why are you passionate about it? What got you interested in it?
Thank you, Sarah. I think, like you said, it's a topic that really traverses all boundaries, all borders, all denominations, all religions. If you are living, and I can really only speak to the Western world where we live, if you are living in the Western world, you are constantly bombarded with messaging, imaging. When we were kids, it was the occasional magazine and commercial. Now it is constant. It is pervasive. It is in your face, always. A definition of beauty that is very narrow. And usually, sadly, people usually use beauty as a synonym for, when it comes to women's beauty, thin, right? What were you going to say?
I was going to say worth.
Right, worth, yeah. And how we define, right. So a woman bases how she feels about herself based on how attractive she feels other people perceive her to be.
Yeah.
This is not the ideal. This is just the reality. Yeah. And we're constantly getting that message in our face every second, every ad. Of course, there are some positive changes. The world, I think, has gotten a bit woke to this. So now, like plus size models who are size 10 to 14 are appearing. But I think that in general, we have a crisis. And I mean, I used to use the word, believe it or not, pandemic, epidemic a few years ago when I would talk about this crisis, but I don't want to use that word anymore. I hope to never hear the word pandemic again. But it's a pervasive problem. And it's a problem not just because it affects, and it has a ripple effect in so many areas. Because another big area that this comes to play is in intimacy and our own feelings of sexuality, that people feel if you aren't, according to narrow media definitions, beautiful, then you're either unworthy of great sex, or you're incapable, or nobody will desire you. I think this also comes to play in self-esteem, which is, we know, a core aspect of innate health is feeling good about ourselves, feeling like we can positively contribute to the world. But the statistics are startling about how often, and it's not only a gender issue, because I think that men have their own challenges with this, both in the way that they perceive mates and the way they perceive themselves. But I only have direct experience of what it's like to be a woman, so that's where I'm going to really focus. But I think that the amount of time that women spend thinking about how they look and wanting and how they are perceived is astronomical. And so my sort of beginning of my journey thinking about this issue and trying to the best of my ability to be part of the solution, or to change the culture, to change my experience of the culture and the people around me, my children, the only person we can really have influence on is ourselves. So I try to influence myself, and hopefully that will influence my children, my students. I teach in a lot of schools. So my journey kind of began, I remember being 14 years old and being a cheerleader and wearing my uniform for the first time in high school, which was super exciting because you aren't allowed to wear short shorts above 4 inches above your knee. The fingertip rule, that was the rule in my high school, except if you were a cheerleader when it was pep rally day or Friday game day, the cheerleaders are able to wear their uniforms. And so I had that short little skirt with the bloomers. And I remember looking, obsessing, looking in front of the mirror the night before. And I was looking actually like in a window mirror in the hallway of my house. And I remember noticing for the first time how my thigh got bigger as my leg went higher. And obviously, this is a natural, normal phenomenon. That's what legs are supposed to look like. That's how they're designed, muscle structure, bone structure, but being really bothered by it and having this sinking feeling for the first time. It was, like post-puberty. It was the first time that I thought to myself, oh my God, I look fat and I'd rather be dead. And not like thank God I didn't have like real suicidal ideology, but just sort of thinking, I don't want to do this. I don't want to wear this uniform. What's everyone going to think? People used to think I was pretty. Now they're going to maybe think I'm fat. And I think that unfortunately, fat and pretty seem to be antonyms in the minds of 14-year-old girls, at least mine at the time, and many 14-year-old girls who I talked to. And that translates into a lack of worthiness. Yeah. And so thinking that it's the end of the world, well, it sounds so superficial and so dumb and like, okay, you just want to shake that my 14-year-old self, and any girl who would possibly think such a thing, right? While we would want to shake them and say like, come on, you're so much more than this, and you were created for more than this, and you're beautiful. But what if you actually aren't what society deems beautiful? Then what? What is your path to happiness then? And the reason I think that it could lead to real negative, dangerous, toxic, hurtful thoughts is because of this association with worthiness and beauty. And if they like me, then I'm accepted, then I accept me. And this is very dangerous. Any sort of if, then, when contingent happiness statements are very dangerous because they're outside of our hands, meaning to the degree that which other people will perceive me, I have zero control over that. So I'm giving away my happiness to someone else. So I don't remember how I got myself to school the next day, psychologically, but it's just the first vivid memory that I have. And I spent, the next 6-8 years really obsessing over my appearance. And in investing and in particular, to some degree it was for the boys, but it was also for the girls. And it was just for everyone but me. And that's where this becomes so toxic for young people. And I wish that I could say it was a localized issue, but it's not just young people. And, the statistics speak for themselves about the amount of time, money, effort, interest that people spend on their appearance. So I just want to quickly add in a positive that I don't think any individual thing in this world is either all good or all bad. So I'm not saying that investing in our appearance is all bad. I think we just have to go deep and ask ourselves, what's my why, right? This is a question that we should ask about everywhere that we invest time, money, energy, effort. Like if I'm investing mental energy in this, why? Yeah. Because if it's not, if I don't like the answer to that, so I can choose to reroute. Now it's not easy to reroute that, but so I think that the question, and we're hopefully going to get to this later when I talk about some Jewish perspectives on this subject, which is what's my why? Why do I want to look good? Yeah. Is it because I'm attaching how I look with my inherent worthiness? Because that doesn't seem to be a healthy model. Am I dressing for other people? Am I dressing based on how I want other people to think of me, perceive me, and then judge me? So that seems to be a big effort, and I just don't know if it's the right place to invest our energy. So I just got interested in this based on my own journey and feeling so helpless to, the big societal pressure. Yeah. And I remember also thinking from a very young age that being ugly would be the worst thing in the world. Like I remember thinking, I feel so bad and I thought I was relatively attractive. I was getting a lot of positive feedback from my peers at that stage of my life. But I remember thinking, what if I was ugly? what about ugly people? That, and I remember thinking this to myself. Of course, I'm so embarrassed thinking that. I'm trying not to judge my younger self, my unevolved self, but just thinking that must be the worst thing in the world. Like, how could anyone show their face somewhere being ugly? Like, I would never want to be that. Okay, so fast forward, I had 5 kids in quick succession. And, you know, they say like most people keep and hold on to 10 pounds per kid. So I have 5 kids. And I had 50 pounds that took me over a decade to lose, which I did recently, eventually, thank God. But like, and you know, there's so much pressure now, like, oh, where's your before after picture? And I am never going to do that. And I'm not saying for the people that do that, there's anything inherently wrong. It's all about what your intentions are. But the reason I'm not going to do that has to do with how I want to educate my children in this subject, because the me with the extra 50 pounds was very worthy and very fabulous and had a lot to offer the world. And I was really in touch with that, even during those years that people might perceive that I was fat, which is in the minds of many people, ugly. So it's been really a journey for me. And I'm sorry, I know I should just answer like short answers to each question, but
you know what's fascinating about hearing all this? Because we grew up very differently. I grew up going to an all girls, you know, Orthodox Jewish school where we had a very strict uniform, and I had a very similar experience. And it's like amazing how it doesn't make a difference whether you're a cheerleader with like, you know, a short little skirt, or you're wearing a pleated, ugly uniform skirt. You know, that same pressure.
Actually, cheerleading skirts are pleated as well, but they look very different than the base
very different
than your high school skirt.
Yes, but it was the same, very similar sense of maybe like there wasn't the boys to impress, but at least not during school hours. But you know, there was so much pressure to be thin, and so much sense of self-worth tied into that, and a lot of eating disorders that went on in my high school.
Oh yeah, I didn't even mention that. Like that was a huge part of my life as well. You know, and it's almost like it's like casual eating disorders, like disordered eating, disordered thinking around food, that food was a reward, or that food was, you know, like that we should be punished if we ate too many calories in one day. And I think you're right. It's sad that it traverses all, you know, sort of the socioeconomic barrier and the religious barrier, and that, you know, eating disorders in the Jewish world, some statistics indicate, are higher than in the general population. And of course, the psychology of eating disorders go a lot deeper than this discussion, because there's a lot to them. But just this constant pressure, this constant, like I think back now and I'm like, oh my God, I use so much mental RAM. Like I could have been filling my mind and using my mental energy on so many more productive things. And I'm never going to get that time or energy back. And I wish that I could. And I wish that I could save my kids and all kids everywhere from the angst and the anguish that really dominated my mindset for so long.
You know what? I had an interesting experience recently. This past summer, I was at my parents' house and I was looking through some albums from when I was in high school. And I see this picture of myself, and I've had 4 kids, but unlike you, haven't lost that baby weight just yet. And I was looking at the picture and I was thin and I looked beautiful, and I wanted to like shake my younger self and say, oh my gosh, like you should have enjoyed that time, you know. And also the fact that like I thought I was fat then, like I'm like, that was like, I'm looking at this picture, I'm like, what were you thinking, you know? I was like,
totally
go back to my younger self and be like, you're beautiful, like, you know.
I think we've all had that experience where like, halavai, I should be my fat 15-year-old self, right?
Oh my gosh.
But Sarah, like, and this message is to me and to you and to all of us, because I think this is such a human experience. We're all in this collectively. But what's 20 year from now self gonna say to, how old are you, Sarah? Or you don't have to
30,
say.
It's okay, I'm 37.
Okay, so what's 57-year-old, God willing, in good health, Sarah, gonna say to 37-year-old Sarah? Like, why didn't you accept yourself more? Like, don't. And like, this is just a life lesson, really, which is don't ever give away 1 minute of your happiness. Like, don't, and I mean, we need a model, and we need a paradigm, and we need a path, and we need a way. And hopefully we're going to get more into that in this interview, and hopefully, God willing, it's, I always say, if I, like, when I'm asked to speak on any subject, I'm like, if I could, like, give you the magic pill on happiness, on relationship, on love, on good intimacy, on healthy self-esteem, if I could in 45 minutes, set you on a path, then I would have working car doors, right? And I would come to Orlando and actually go to a Disney park, because everybody's looking for that quick fix. And I don't have a magic solution. I don't have, a, like, okay, just tune into this class and I'm going to set you free. But I believe that with all of these things, we have the innate power. And what I hope to do is inspire people to get on their path there's no magic, in life, in real life. The only thing that we can do is tap into our own inner love and our own inner connection and our own inner life force that creates a life of freedom and a blessed life. But only we can do that. But hopefully everyone will hear some ideas that sort of spark them to believe that there are other models out there, that even though I don't have a 45-minute solution for each individual person, because we are all such individuals, the beginning of healing is recognizing that we were created for so much more than this, and that freedom really comes when we unlock the handcuffs. But the problem is that the shackles of this subject are thrown at us so intensely and so strongly by all of the messaging that we're getting from a young age. So we wish we could go back to our teenage selves and unlock that key, and unhandcuff them, release them from those shackles, but only we could have done that, right? Only, like, everyone can set themselves free. And I think that for me, like, Jewish wisdom has been a huge source of inspiration in trying to learn to really love myself as I am. And that's why, like, I think that there's an implication in those before after pictures that was the bad me and this is a good me. Right. But it's all me. Yeah. And it's all good. Right?
Totally. And, like, going with what you said, I know you said you can only unlock your own self, but I would love for you to address a little bit before we get into the tools or whatever. Like, I know you have teenage daughters, right?
I do. Thank God.
And I would love to hear kind of your perspective. You talked about it from, growing up, but now as a mom of daughters, do you want to?
Well, I think, and this is something that, I'm figuring out along the way, and I don't have all the answers. I don't actually believe that anybody has all the answers, but I have sort of my own observations and perceptions. Now I have 3 teenagers, and I'm sort of thriving through it. And I really love this age. It is an age of exploration, but I think that what I try with God's help to do in raising my children is to teach them core self-esteem, intrinsic self-esteem. Whereas I had a lot of external self-esteem that looked like this. When I get positive affirmations from other people, when I succeed in whatever ways, when people say, oh, you look so pretty, or, I got recognition in various areas. And the weird part is, and I hope that I'm self-deprecating enough that this won't come off the wrong way, but during that time period, I got so much positive affirmations from other people. But the problem with becoming an external validation junkie, which I'm on the road to recovery of that. I think it's like any other addiction. We should always be cognizant of it, and no one's ever 100% cured. So I'm not immune. I don't have an inoculation for that. But am I frozen?
Yeah, I can hear you though.
Sarah?
Yeah, I do you hear me? Hello? Uh-oh. Sorry, guys. hopefully we will get reconnected soon. Oh, there you are. Okay. I
I'm
don't
sorry.
think. Okay.
Can you hear me? I think
Yeah.
what I was saying is that the problem with being that I was an external validation junkie, and I think that I'm still trying to be in recovery from that. I don't think that we're ever all the way there, is that it feels good at the time to get positive affirmation, for people to say you're so pretty. And there's something wrong with enjoying other people's adoration. Inherently, there's nothing wrong with it. The problem is when we internalize it to base how we feel about ourselves based on how other people perceive us. And the problem, of course, is it's totally outside of our hands and it's totally subjective. The goal with real intrinsic self-esteem is that it's based on my own core beliefs, and those can never be taken away from me. So even if, like, I remember, like, I'm sure you see like teenage pimples or bad haircuts. I remember getting a haircut when I was a freshman in college. I just decided to whack it all off one day, like thinking, and this is like so embarrassing to admit, that I was sitting in a class afterwards, I was like emboldened at the time. I had just joined a sorority. I had a really cute boyfriend, and I just decided, like, okay, I'm just going to go for it. Like, I looked cute in a bob when I was younger, and walking back from the haircut place back on campus, and then sitting in class, crying the whole class, thinking, oh my God, what have I done? I'm going to be so ugly. It doesn't look feminine. Everyone's going to hate it. And then, okay, when I got positive feedback, my feelings went back up. Yeah. But what about that time period when I was so out of control? So I think what we have to do, and how I've tried to raise my children, and God willing, they're a work in progress, like every human being, but is to really teach kids, and if we're an adult who suffers from this, it's never too late, actually. So, but ideally from a very young age, teaching our children what real self-esteem is. And from a Jewish perspective, real self-esteem, and actually from a universal perspective, if anyone here reads Marianne Williams, who has that famous quote that is attributed to Nelson Mandela, but it's actually hers, about our deepest fear. Do you know her? She's you could look her up. She ran for president. She's like a political activist. She's a brilliant woman. She's born Jewish but doesn't observe Judaism. She wrote a book called A Return to Love. It's interesting because I heard her recently. I mean, I listened to a podcast that probably took place a long time ago, Oprah interviewing her, talking about like this Jewish concept, even though she wasn't quoting the Torah, but this is the Jewish belief, and also a universal spiritual enlightenment belief, which is every single human being has a piece of the divine in them. Every single person was created with God's hallmark beauty and creativity. Like, God is the original artist. God makes mountains and world wonders and planets and galaxies and the stars and the moon and the sky. And he also created you, every single human. And our core inherent value worthiness is based on that. And that can never be taken away, not with a pimple, not with an ugly short haircut, not with a thigh that gets larger as your leg goes up, not if you don't fit into society's standards of beauty, but that your core essence is connected to something much bigger than you as an individual. It's connected to the creator of the universe and every other aspect of humanity and of the whole world. We're all one. And that's why, like, so many of us are drawn to yoga, right? Because the divine in me honors the divine in you. And that's what relationships based on real love and heart are. And her book, A Return to Love, is really all about that. And that's really the Jewish understanding as well, that our essence is love. So she talks about how there's a spectrum, and the two opposites are fear and love. And when we're operating in a place of fear, we're not experiencing our highest calling, which is being in a place of love. Okay. So I think for so many of us, our relationship with our appearance is fear-based. Yeah. And that goes back to that real deep fear that I had. What if I was ugly? What if people thought I was ugly? Then like, how could I even live? And I'm embarrassed to say this because I like to think of myself as a relatively enlightened and smart person, but that was a very strong feeling and perception that I had.
Yeah.
So, and that really goes back to what's your why? So when you're, like I love lipstick. I mean, you've traveled with me enough, I put on lipstick and sparkly eyeshadow. I forgot to wear the purple that you love. I put on eyeshadow and lipstick every day, except for Spot. And it doesn't matter who I'm going to see or what I'm going to do. I like the way it looks. So I just have to keep it in check though, and ask myself, do I feel not worthy when I don't have it? And why am I putting it on? Is it to impress other people? Is it to seek other people's validation? Listen, it's normal to want people to like you. That's a core human drive, right? And what's behind that drive for people to like us is connectivity. And, as Dr. Sue Johnson, like one of the world's top sex therapists says, human beings are wired for connection. So that desire for people to like us, for people to think we're attractive, it doesn't necessarily have to come from a bad place. But I think we make a mistake, and we think that people will like us if we're pretty, if we wear nice clothes, if we have, the latest fashions, if we don't have wrinkles, if our eyes go like this and our cheeks go like this. And again, I'm not saying that there's anything inherently wrong with people getting work. Some of my closest friends are plastic surgeons and enhancement specialists. And, that's a path that they find brings people a lot of positive feelings. And I'm not judging that in any way, shape, or form. But I guess what I am saying is that if we base our self-esteem based on other people's perceptions of us, we're setting ourselves up for our happiness to be in other people's hands. So I try to raise my children that they don't ever doubt their own worthiness. And, I have one child who struggles mightily socially. And it's he's my youngest child. He's my first kid who really had this social struggle. And I see why is it so painful for him? Because he wants connection. He craves connection because that's how humans are wired. And so not getting that hurts so much, right? We can only experience pain when we have a desire, when we want something. So I think when it comes to wanting people to like us, that's normal. That's natural. That's a human quality. I think the problem is that we don't understand that other people's liking us is really based on how we make them feel, right? Like, so, and this is where like Judaism teaches us the value of a smile. Why are people so drawn to certain people? It's usually because they make them feel good. And, as like Maya Angelou famously said, people will forget what you say and they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So I think in the, from Stephen Covey, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. But I love Stephen Covey, 7 Habits. How do we win friends and influence people? So basically by caring about them, by having a soul connection to them, by seeing the beauty in other people, and not just are they thin, do they have straight hair, do they have a small nose, do they have symmetry of features? It's like, how can I see their essence? And when people tap into their essence, their core goodness, their core light, their core values, that is so attractive, right? Other people love being around people who are manifesting their own greatness. And I try to teach my kids, if you want people to like you, it's not just having the best, designer shoes, because listen, I struggle a lot with my daughter and she's very into fashion. She wants the same brand shoes that everyone has. And I'm like, dude, I never spent that much money on my own shoes. I'm not buying it for you when you're 11. Right. And I think that we sometimes think that other people will like us based on our appearance. And I just don't think that it's the reality. And I think, if being objectively attractive to other people is the ticket to a club. Do you really want to be in that club?
Right.
So this is something that I really try to teach my daughters, but I also really try to teach my sons. And, I think like, as, most experts say, and this was hard for me, especially when I was very overweight, even obese, that I tried so hard not to say in front of any of my children, "Ugh, I'm so fat and ugly," right? Because I don't want them to think that fat necessarily means ugly. Listen, I'm very pro health. People should be healthy, right? The food that we eat has a huge impact on our brains and our body and our cardiovascular system. So people should take care of their health. It's a mitzvah in the Torah to guard your health exceedingly well. But to equate fat with ugly and bad is sending a very dangerous message. And what happens when our sons hear us as mothers saying, "Oh, I'm so fat and ugly," that then they think that fat is ugly. And then they think that ugly is unworthy. And they're going out into the world and they're looking for attraction is really important. It's a really important aspect of any romantic relationship, to desire another person, right? And to want to be desired. That's natural, that's normal. But I'm here to tell you, ladies, and even overweight, actually particularly overweight ladies, do you know what all the research indicates who has the best sex lives? Do you know?
Well, the way you're saying it, I'm going to guess it's people who are overweight.
Yeah, fat women. Now, I'm not saying that this is a model for like, oh, okay, I'll just gain weight so that I can have better sex. It's not that. It's that psychology research. So the problem is that this is the complete opposite of how society sort of like, if you look at,
you would think it's the opposite.
Yeah, you think it's the opposite based on the magazines and the TV shows. And like one of my high school friends wanted us to have a watch party watching the new 90210 because the old 90210 was like our anthem, like that's how we learned about everything from 90210. So when the reruns, like not the reruns, the new one came out a few years ago, some of my high school friends invited me to watch it. And, we had like a little watch party, whatever. And it was insane how much difference the actresses looked in, I guess it was about 25 years. I don't know how many years in between. I'm guessing 20 years between the two. Like Kelly and Brenda and Andrea, they had hips, they had boobs, they had legs. They were a normal woman. And their counterpart equivalents in the new shows are emaciated. And they have no hips, they have no legs, they have no chest. And it's just so sad how society has changed. And I think everyone like famously knows that Marilyn Monroe was a whopping 14, right? And now she would never get a modeling job at
She'd be a plus size model, maybe.
Totally, she'd be a plus size model. And I think that society is it's just getting worse and worse. And even though there is a strong female empowerment energy in the world, and we're seeing all sorts of beautiful wisdom and amazing memes that really, reveal some of these truths, I think that our kids are still bombarded with a constant barrage of impossible ideals. I mean, I think like it's a joke how they say that like Barbie, if someone made the proportions of a Barbie doll, she couldn't stand up because her chest was so heavy and, she'd have to crawl because just proportionately her body couldn't support her weight.
Wow. And do you think that social media affects all this? No problem. Wow. A lot to think about.
Sorry, I have
no, I'm just asking.
Today. Social media is, it's like all things. I don't want to say it's inherently good or inherently bad, but it has tremendous potential for the bad in this area because, Facebook, social media is a construct, and we all know this to be true, right? That, what do I mean? It's a construct. It's selective imaging and selective messaging. And we're constructing a perception of how we want people to perceive us. So I read a few years ago, and there's so much research on this. Now, like, I think Instagram is even worse in this respect. I think they're all bad in all different ways, but of course there's a lot of good. Like, many of you are going to be watching this on Facebook, and we wouldn't be able to connect with you if it weren't for Facebook. So nothing's all good or all bad. It's all about our intention. It's all about how we use it. And it's all about our ability to seek good and enact good. But when it comes to something like Instagram, where there's influencers, I think Instagram is where there's the most influence of individuals, I think. I mean, I'm not like a social media guru or anything like that, but that's my perception. And you read about, like, people can become Instagram models in a whole different capacity than it used to be, like the traditional modeling route. But the problem is that there's so many lies involved. And this is true with print media as well, and visual media. You know, many of you have probably watched Adrienne Gold's amazing talk about this. And if you haven't, I highly recommend it, about airbrushing. And I mean, now listen, like, the world of filters, right? Like, we want to have different eyes. We want to have different skin tones. We want to have different shaping, you know, and then there's the like duck lips and angles and all that. And it's just crazy, because I read like a tell-all of an internet model. She was Australian, and she was became like very, very successful and very popular. She had millions of viewers. And she said that she was totally miserable because it was so unauthentic. And she said she became, and a lot of influencers say this, they become adoration junkies, you know, constantly check. And I mean, I'm guilty of this as much as the next person. You know, you post something and then you wait to see eagerly how many likes, how many loves, how many comments. Do they like me? Will they like me? Am I okay? Do they approve of me? You know? But what's so dangerous about it, and we can know this to be true intellectually, but the power of imaging, I mean, this is why marketing and PR and all that is such a huge industry, because there's this ability to create an alternate reality. So she said that they would, like, you know, spend all day with a professional camera team out on a boat with artificial lighting and, you know, a pose person and whatever. And, you know, they would spend hours and hours capturing every single shot possible, you know, try to lean over so that your stomach doesn't bend in any way. God forbid your stomach bends while you're sitting down. And, you know, and she said they would spend the whole day, and then it would turn into one post that was like, you know, chilling by the beach on a relaxing day. Right. And so when you see that, when the millions of people that would view it see that, they think that that's how she spends her day, just chilling on a boat, you know? And so the messaging is that ideal of beauty is possible, but it's not. It's airbrushed, it's photoshopped, it's professional filters, a whole team. And the problem is that when, you know, like Instagram is, you know, no one ever burns food. Everyone's always only in love with their spouse. You know, and I think that there's some really deep subliminal messages that creep into our psyche, even if we're aware of it, that we think that, you know, it's possible to live this filtered life. And this is why, like, pornography, for example, is so destructive for people's intimate life, because it creates a false reality that isn't based on true or real experiences. And then the true and real experiences don't meet up, and there's a lot of like sexual dissatisfaction. So the same is true with like modeling. Like, we're never going to look like that. And why are we never going to look like that? Because, you know, we don't have a camera crew, and we don't have a makeup team, and we eat. Right. She said that she was restricted to a very, very dangerously low caloric intake. And, you know, so I think that it's very hard to, and by the way, these are the images that our boys are seeing. And I'm differentiating between male and female, only because there seems to be trends. I think every gender could potentially fall victim to this, but
Yeah.
statistically speaking, men tend to make more rash visual decisions. So the problem is that they're seeing a construct, and that's not what real women look like. I mean, there are some women who look that way, possibly. Certainly not airbrushed. There's no way to airbrush yourself, but that this is the definition of beautiful at a rapid pace. So if that's the imaging that you grew up with, then when you're sitting in front of a real normal person, how can you feel attracted to them? So the answer, the path is you got to see their soul. And that's much harder to do because that requires an investment, and that requires seeing beyond, right? Not just accepting, the superficial.
Right. I love how you talk about this as an issue, not just for our girls, but also for our boys, because it really
Totally. Because our girls are trying to impress our boys, as a generalization. Obviously it works across gender, all genders, transgender, every single person is susceptible to feeling that they need to conform to media personas and perceptions.
Okay. Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the problem. I would love to hear what you think the root of this problem is. Where does it come from? I mean, you touched on it a bit about, but is there anything else?
I think that there's obviously a lot to that, but one aspect, one way of, we're all so interested in the vaccine, God willing, everybody should get it in the right time. But the sort of way to inoculate ourselves against being susceptible to this and teaching our children, I think is rooted in core self-esteem.
Okay.
And in knowing, so here's the thing. I don't want anyone to watch this and think, well, I'm doomed because I didn't grow up with that positive self-esteem module. So the amazing thing that psychologists are learning more and more about is that, yes, our nature, our nurture, and our environment has a huge impact on how we think, feel, and act, but it can always be rewired, right?
Neuroplasticity thing.
Yeah, we can positive affirmations, self-awareness. We can always change the way we think. That's the amazing thing. The human brain is so unbelievable, and we can always change. So I think that what we have to do is we have to recognize self-limiting beliefs for what they are, right? I'm fat. No one's ever going to like me. I'm ugly. Other people's perception of me is the most important thing. These can all be retaught. And I am a big believer in replacement therapy, right? So if we're going to eradicate and try to quiet self-limiting beliefs and voices in our heads, we have to replace them with uber empowering beliefs, which is, I am loved, I am worthy, I am special, I am desirable. And where does that all come from? From a Jewish perspective, it comes from God. But even if a person doesn't believe in God, they can believe in the inherent beauty in everything. Humans are beautiful, right? Every single person has something to love about them. And, I loved the book Wonder. I think that have you read Wonder, Sarah?
My kids have. I should probably read it too.
You have to read it with them. Okay. It should be required reading for being a human being. The movie is great, but I don't think it does nearly, it's great for visuals, but it doesn't do justice to, because Augie, the main character, is totally at risk for feeling ugly. He's craniofacial deformity is a real, I don't want to say disease or is a real condition. It's a real thing. So if we were talking to someone who had that, how would we advise them? How can they create a path for feeling beautiful? And I think that it's possible for every single person, but they have to connect to their own inner power. and their own inner being, and having real, true self-esteem. And from a Jewish perspective, our self-esteem comes from our innate ability to contribute to the world, right? So this really goes back to, if you like, why do our kids and us, why do we want people to think that we're attractive? Because we want them to want us. So if we can understand that we can contribute to, every single person has something unique to contribute to the world would not be the same if it was missing even one single person. And that includes people that look in every single way. So if you were talking to your kids and they had someone, let's say, who had this in their class, you would say to them, look for their good. Try to connect to them on a soul level, and you can transform your perception of reality.
Yeah.
So I think that connecting to our own inner being, the place of love that we were created from, right? God created us out of love, for love.
Yeah.
And when we can connect to that, then we can start to see our own beauty and our own and everyone else's beauty, right? When you get to know people, it's hard not to love them.
Right.
Right. But we often don't give people a chance. So I'm sure everybody's had the experience where when you get to know someone, like, you suddenly think that, like, even if you didn't before think that they were so pretty, suddenly you did, because you get to know them and you connect with their soul. So I think, just connecting this to some Jewish wisdom, it's interesting because secular sort of sociologists, anthropologists, thought leaders have been trying to define beauty for a long time, right? What is beautiful? So do you know what they say?
No.
Symmetry.
Okay.
Right? Like even featured. That's what makes someone beautiful.
Okay.
So it's like a fascinating concept, and I want to apply it to if this is in line with the Jewish understanding. So I would say yes, but it's a symmetry of outside and inside reflecting. Right? So let's look at, for example, in the Torah, the Talmud says that there were 4 of the most beautiful women who ever lived. And I want to focus on 2 of them because they're the most well-known. So that's of course, Sarah and Esther. And the Talmud tells us that Sarah and Esther actually have they have quite a few connections and similarities. Sarah lived to be 127, and Esther was the queen of 127 provinces. But beyond that, those of you that have been learning Jewish wisdom for a while, you know that the etymology of a word reveals the essence of a word. Unlike in the English language or Latin, where Latin to some degree, actually, there is real etymology, but in English, words are just sort of what we call stam in English, right? Like they're just, a chair is a chair because. Whereas like in Hebrew, there's a deeper meaning behind the word kiseh, right? So, which is a chair in Hebrew. So Sarah and Esther, Sarah has another name, which is Yiska in the Torah and in the Midrash. And Yiska, you can see me, right? You didn't freeze?
You are frozen. Again, I'm sorry. But we could hear you. So I guess keep talking and I'm sure eventually it'll fix itself. I don't.
Okay, did I freeze again? I'm sorry. So Sarah and Yiska, Sarah's another name for Sarah is Yiska, and Esther actually have a similar shoresh, which means liskot, which means to gaze.
Okay.
So what we know about them is they were people who could see past the superficial. They could peer into something and understand its essence and reality. And this was the essence of them. So they're both known as incredibly beautiful women in their generation, the most beautiful women in their time. So the question is, like, I'm sure you heard this, everybody knows that Sarah was beautiful and Esther was beautiful. So what does that mean? That they had a straight nose, that they didn't have wrinkles, that they had good skin tone? I don't know. I don't personally think that that's what the Torah would be referencing. And so actually there's the Talmudic sources and all sorts of sages talk in particular about these 2 women's beauty. So I want to talk about each of them. So Sarah, we know Sarah was a person who was completely chesed oriented. She sometimes had to have Gevura, restraint, whereas Abraham was maybe like all chesed. But Sarah was a pillar of chesed. She was a pillar of loving kindness. The reason that we are Jewish today is because Sarah opened up her home to the world, right? She brought everyone in. She loved people and she wanted to share with them. And it says something interesting about Sarah when she's being eulogized in Haya Sarah, in the parsha where she passes away. It says that she died when she was 127 years old. And so the sages ask, why didn't they just say 127 years? Why did they say 127? So it says that when she was 100, when she was 100, it was as if she was free of mistakes like a 20-year-old. And when she was 20, she had the beauty of a 7-year-old. I think Rashi says this. So this is a very fascinating way to understand both Sarah and beauty. So if I was defining peak age for beauty, I would say 20. Not 7. 7's like a weird age to say that someone's beautiful. Like 7 is like a child. You don't really, I mean, I guess you call a kid cute or yummy, but you don't usually say like a 7-year-old is so beautiful. You say that about like a teenager. That's who's in Miss America competitions, right? A 20-year-old. So, so it says there's a lot of different commentary about what that means, that she had the beauty of a 7-year-old. And one that I really connect to is that it said that her beauty was for her, like a 7-year-old. So, you know, and it's interesting because this 8-year-old son who I was referencing, 8.5, he's struggling with making friends and self-esteem. He spends an awful lot of time in front of the mirror working on his hair. And like already by 8.5, he cares so much what people think of him, right? Like he wants to look a certain way and be perceived by his peers. But when he was 6, 5, 6, 7, and I think about my own daughters at that age too, they were so beautiful because they were so not caring what other people thought of them. They're not using their beauty as like a tool or as a way of getting people to perceive them a certain way. So Sarah, what made her so beautiful her whole life was that she wasn't trying to get people to think that she was beautiful. It was her chesed-oriented nature that emanated out of her, and people wanted to be around her. They wanted to be like her because she was so giving in nature. And it's interesting because Esther has another really interesting aspect to her relationship with beauty. So we know that like Ahasuerus was no saint, right? He was not a person who really cared about, like he wasn't looking for love for all the right reasons, right? He had his first wife killed. I mean, there's really a lot more to the superficial reading of the Megillah, but in essence, he had off with her head his first wife, and when it was time to come up with a new queen for this sort of united, this woman was going to be Mother Persia in the new huge Persian Empire that was the largest and most far-flung empire that the ancient world had ever seen, right? So he was looking for the best woman. So what did he do? Of course, he had a beauty pageant. And of all the women in all the different provinces, Esther was chosen. Now, we don't know a ton about Esther's life before she was chosen to be queen, but the Gemara has a fascinating discussion based on a few midrashim about Esther. So Esther was chosen to be queen because Ahasuerus was drawn to her. He chose her of all the women. And what does the Mishnah, what does the midrash say about her? That she was green. And do you know how old she was? 75. 75. Wow. Okay, so like in the ancient world, like I love you Golden Girls, any of you watching, but in the ancient world, you certainly can't imagine that the king, when he's choosing the paradigm of beauty, for him to choose someone who's 75 and has green skin. So the Midrash the Gemara is very bothered by this, and there's an excellent discussion about what it was that was so beautiful. Like it says simply in the Megillah many times that Esther was beautiful. So what is this beauty? 75 and green? What? So it says that actually she had something called the chut shel chesed, a thread of chesed that emanated from her. Now, interestingly, if you look through all the sources about Esther, you don't really find which behavior she engaged in that would qualify her as such a chesed-oriented person, right? But one, it was so strong that it had him choose her to be queen. And then later, I guess in chapter 6 or 7, when I think it was 6 or 7, when it's already been like 2 weeks since Purim, so I've lost all
I'm on Pesach mode already.
totally, me too. So it says that she was so scared to approach the king, right? So scared that she wasn't even sure that she could do it because it was punishable by death for the queen, even the queen. So this just tells you something about what Ahasuerus was like. It was punishable by death for her to approach him without being called. She did anyways, bravely, famously. And his response was mind-blowing. He said, Esther, you're so beautiful. Whatever it is that you want, even if it's half the kingdom, I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah.
So like, was he such a deep guy that he was connected to her chesedic nature? That's not what the Gemara seems to suggest. The Gemara seems to suggest that this chut shel chesed, the thread of chesed that wove her whole life, emanated out of her. And that was irresistible. When Ahasuerus, a man who was with a different woman every, however often he wanted a different woman every night, all 127 women who were elected from each province were then put into the king's concubine with the hundreds of other women who were in the king's concubine. But that chesed, chut shel chesed, emanated from Esther and drew him in. And I think that it's just, this really takes me to like how we can advise our children. It's normal to want people to like you. I want people to like me. I'm wondering if you guys are gonna like think this is a good speech. How's my lipstick? What's going on with my hair? Like, it's normal. It's natural. I've done a lot of work in this area, but I'm still wanting you to like me. Why? Because I desire a deep connection with you. And I hope that my heart will reach your heart. And that's a very real desire that all humans have. But if we look at how Sarah was able to build a whole nation, right? We're all Jewish today because of people wanting to jump into that, right? And attach themselves to that chesed of hers. And the Jewish people were saved, right? There was a decree that Haman enacted with Ahasuerus' help that was going to kill every single Jewish person in the world, man, woman, and child. And that decree was reversed because Ahasuerus loved Esther's shine, that spark of her. She was a person who was in touch with her soul, and it radiated, it emanated, it transformed and overcame her green skin and whatever wrinkle, whatever a 75-year-old might be perceived as to look like. So I say to my kids all the time, you want people to like you, like them. Get in touch with your own soul. Get in touch with your own light, with your own goodness, and try to connect to that light and goodness of other people. And that's, and if you think about like all of us, the connections that we make, who we're attracted to, who we love, it's really so much more than if they have wrinkles. I mean, I remember like when Cindy Crawford became popular, I was like, yes, I have a natural one. And like suddenly moles were okay on your face right here. Yeah. But what if she hadn't have done that? But I've spent my whole life thinking, what about this awful mole? I have 2 of them. Actually, I got to get rid of them, So I think that we have to spend, and this is where I always try to empower my kids and myself and anyone who I can have any influence on, that your life is 100% in your hands and will be whatever you choose to make it. You cannot control if you have a mole on your face, and you cannot control your body type and size. Of course, we have to be healthy. I'm so into eating healthy. But by and large, we can't control that. I have naturally white teeth. I've never done anything to it, but I have a ton of other physical issues that I wish I didn't have. So much is outside of our control. But what is in our control is what we project outwards. Right? The getting in touch with our own beauty, believing in our own core goodness, connecting to the spark of God in every single person, and certainly within ourselves. That is completely within our power. So much is not in our power. We can't control what people think of our appearance. We can't control that we don't look like Instagram models, but we can control how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive other people. The whole world is waiting for us to love them. That's our free will. That's within our potential. And I think that we have this incredible Jewish paradigm for what real beauty is. And I hope that we can really understand that every single one of us have a potential to be like Sarah, like Esther. And if we all want to be beautiful because that's how God made us, that's an innate desire, we need to connect to our chesed. We need to connect to that part of us that is loving and giving and sharing and wants to connect, because it is so, so strong in every single person. And it's really up to us to manifest it.
Wow.
Sorry, that was a long answer.
No, that was so incredibly beautiful. It's like a total kind of paradigm shift, I think, on beauty. I don't think that the world talks about beauty the way you're talking about it, and it's really impressive. And I know, I think it starts from when they're little, like when we call our kids, you know, hey gorgeous, hey beautiful, whatever it is.
I know, it's so hard not to.
And I do it sometimes. I'm not gonna lie, you know.
Yeah.
But it just, you know, it sounds like a lot of what you're saying is that intrinsic beauty, and intrinsic self-worth, and really like putting that into our head, our children's head, that we have to, you know, that real beauty is not skin deep.
Totally.
Yeah. So, you know, we need to wrap up. You shared so much wisdom. I have to like really take the time to unwrap it. But I'm
talking to myself too, by the way. I'm always talking to myself, hoping that I'll listen.
Yeah, no, really, really, really so much wisdom on so many different topics, really. But I would love for you to, like, if there's one take-home message that our listeners should hear, what would that be?
I have so many, you know, I'm not limited to one thing, but I will just say,
you can do
okay,
this.
so 2 things.
Okay, fine.
You know, when it comes to parenting, we have to be smart and we have to be discerning. And I try to say this stuff to my kids sometimes, and they're like, okay, mom, like, this isn't one of your classes, right? My kids say that to me like all the time. So I think it's, okay, I will just actually contract this into one message, that we can't pass on that which we don't believe. So we all want to raise our children better than, you know, what society is offering them. So the best way to do that is to invest in our own inner beliefs and, you know, get to know your why, connect with your soul, and really just ask yourself, how can I be a person of chesed? How can I be a person who positively contributes to the world? Because that's really what self-esteem is believing in our ability to positively contribute to the world. And the broken world needs you so badly. It needs all of us so badly. The task, and you know, as the Mishnah says, the task is great, the time is limited, but you don't have to complete it, but you're also not free from desisting from it. Like, we have to repair our broken world together. We have to create a supportive and loving environment for all the women and men in the world. And we just, you know, when we choose love, when we choose to connect to our love, our essence of love, our source of love, then we can connect to the love in other people. Beautiful. So, but we have to work on that ourselves before we can spill it over to our children, right? Kids experience what we do way more than they listen to what we say.
Right. Absolutely.
So, and they hear the way we talk to ourselves. They hear the way we speak when we look in the mirror, when we try on clothes, when we get out to go somewhere, they hear. So we have to choose our messaging really carefully, especially with younger children, because the voices that we say to them will be their voices in their heads as they grow up. So choose wisely and come up with some amazing affirmations. If anyone would like some daily affirmations, I could send them to you. You know, just tell yourself how wonderful you are and how much you love yourself as often as you can. Beautiful. It works. There's a whole science to affirmations.
Sounds like we have our work cut out for us.
But you can do it.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Gevura, for joining
You're welcome.
us.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you.
Okay, everyone have a
And
great
I
day.
hope to travel back to Orlando soon when we can get on planes.
I cannot wait.
Okay, be well.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Good to see you.